Israeli officials have confirmed the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, an architect of the October 7th attack on Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Sinwar's death an important moment in the war and called for a return of the remaining hostages. For a look at what this could mean for the war in the Middle East and even what happens with Iran. Let's bring in Richard Haass, Counsel on Foreign Relations, President Emeritus, and Centerview Partners Senior Counselor. Thanks for joining us. Richard, good to see you.
Good to see you, Joe.
Getting ahead of myself to try to analyze what the most likely moves by Netanyahu are. There are political concerns as well as concerns about the overall wars that he's facing on what I guess at least three fronts at this point. What's the most likely thing for him to do? Take the win and try and get the hostages back, or continue? He's had success doing more than people thought, going all the way down south into Rafah, and the idea of you've got to crush Hamas completely, or it's like, you know, cut off the tail of a snake or of certain reptiles. They come back. There's still enough of Hamas to reconstitute itself, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Even if the Israelis have killed, say, half of Hamas's fighters that existed a year ago, that probably still leaves between 10 and 20,000. We also don't know how many recruits might have happened. Look, Hamas is an idea. It's a network. It's a movement as much as it is an organization. And my sense is it survives no matter how successful Israel is militarily, against its troops, against its leadership. And I think one of the real questions is not simply whether Israel now is going to press for a ceasefire. That they might, and even if they do, it's not clear the new leadership of Hamas, such as it is, would agree to it. I think the real question is whether the Israelis introduce a political dimension to their policy that tries to marginalize Hamas, essentially signals to the Palestinians there's an alternative path. If you're willing to give up violence, we're open to satisfying some of your political ends, but you've got to, again, reject Hamas, reject violence. But the Israelis have been loath to introduce such a dimension to their policy, given the politics of their coalition. So we'll see if what happened yesterday was simply a good thing, that is to get rid of this terrorist, or whether it's a turning point. I don't think we know yet, Joe.
The rest, no one knows. The new leadership could be Sinwar's brother, or there's some in exile, I understand, in Qatar that would be more open to a hostage release or some type of negotiations. And also, I mean, maybe Iran now put some pressure, with this guy gone, put some pressure on its proxies to do the ceasefire with a hostage release. And then that could possibly help Iran's chances for less of a retaliatory move.
It's possible that, look, there's lots of moving parts. As you say, you've got Iran, you've got Gaza and Hamas, you've got the war in the north against Hezbollah. In the north, the Israelis had a similar breakthrough. They got rid of the leadership of Hezbollah, and they seem to have decided to press their advantage militarily, rather than take a ceasefire that arguably would have allowed, 60 or 70,000 Israelis to return to their homes in the northern parts of the country. I think right now the Israelis have to decide what they're going to do, as we were just discussing in Gaza. They've also got to decide what is the scale and what is the target set of their retaliation against Iran. They still haven't hit back after the Iranians launched close to, 200 ballistic missiles against Israel. So there's lots of things going on at the moment.
Richard, in terms of Netanyahu in his future, he's gone supposedly from the person that let October 7th happen on his watch to someone that I heard someone yesterday on another news channel call him, he's becoming almost Churchillian at this point, in terms of that he's going to be, his poll numbers are rising at this point. Maybe wouldn't win an election now, but much better, which would almost seem like, for political reasons, he might want to continue on a more, I don't know, to do even more and not push for a ceasefire, even with the hostages, that many are still alive.
Yeah, look, quite possibly. Politically, Bibi Netanyahu has recovered significantly, in part because of what Israel's been able to do in the north against Hezbollah. This will help him as well. He's also helped by the, shall we say, he's a stronger, more capable politician than many of his opponents. I wouldn't quite put him in the same league as Churchill. Again, I think what Bibi Netanyahu has to decide is, what does he do to translate gains on the battlefield to something that's good for Israel, that endures? So his place in history, I think, is going to be more determined by what comes next than by what he's accomplished today. Plus, he still has a lot of baggage. October 7th hasn't gone away. His legal problems haven't gone away. But again, I don't fight your basic point that events of the last few weeks have given him, put him in a much stronger place than he was as recently as a month ago.
Richard, I just wanted to ask how you think the U.S. election plays into all of this. And there's been some talk about Israel waiting or not waiting, or all sorts of things as it relates to the first week of November.
Yeah, look, Andrew, the hardest thing in my business, probably in yours sometimes, is figuring out what motivates people. And to what extent is Bibi Netanyahu motivated by simply what he thinks is the best for Israel, as opposed to what might be the best for himself in terms of his legal and political challenges, his own preferences, I would assume, for Donald Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris. I can't deconstruct that. It's part of the conversation. My guess is we'll never know, because he's not going to make that transparent.
Richard, where is the Israeli population on these questions? Because that ultimately will decide much of this too.
I would say the Israeli population is quite supportive of what Bibi Netanyahu and Israel are doing in Lebanon against Hezbollah. Very tough, very unified about being robust against Iran. Divided, though, on Gaza. Divided on the priority that ought to be given to getting the hostages back. My guess is there's only about 50 hostages who are still alive. And it's also, even if Israel decided it wanted a ceasefire, the new leadership of Hamas may reject it. But all things being equal, the Israeli people are divided about, in some ways, the trajectory of the country. You remember it was a year ago, the big issue was the protests and debates about judicial reform, about democracy. They're divided about Gaza. But I think they're quite unified about the need to take on Iran and take on Hezbollah.